So let's start things off with the Cartier tank. The history on this watch, the story behind it is awesome. So apparently during World War I, Louis Cartier spent some time on the Western Front observing troop movements and actually seeing a little bit of the battles. One thing that impressed him was the tank. Now, if you know your military history, you probably remember that Leonardo da Vinci actually had drawings of tanks, but it was first introduced to the battlefield during World War I. It was the British with the Mark I that first got it out there. The idea with the tank was to break up the stalemate that we had in trench warfare. You had the Germans on one side, the French and the British on the other, and neither of them was moving. All of a sudden, these iron giants hit the battlefield and caused soldiers to panic. Now, Cartier, being French, he was impressed by the Renault tanks, which actually were the first tanks to have the top turned and would inspire future tanks, but he created a line of watches to basically celebrate the design of the tank. Now, the first Cartier tank prototype was made in 1917 and then handed personally by Cartier to John Pershing. He was the commander of American Expeditionary Forces in Europe at the time. Amazing story, right? Well, gents, if you enjoyed that, you're going to love today's video because I'm talking about 10 menswear items that have a military history that you probably don't know about. Next up, we've got the Desert Boot. Now, the company that made this very popular was a company called Clark's. But what you may not know is that Nathan Clark served in World War II. He was with the 8th Army. He's over in Burma, and that was the first time he saw this particular style. He saw it on South African troops. He had seen the design. This is a chukka design, been around for a while. But what he had never seen was actually they had put a sole on it that had a lot of grip, that was very lightweight. They also had reduced the number of eyelets. And so all of a sudden we saw 2 to 3 eyelets right here. They had cut down the height of the chukka. So it was really only ankle support. Why did they do all of this? Because they wanted a boot that was lightweight, easy to move around in the desert. So these South African soldiers told him, hey, we had these cobblers over in Cairo do this. And all of a sudden he got the idea. He took it back home and made this particular style popular. So as that we're talking about boots, let's now talk about Wellington boots. So when you see these, they're very recognizable. These are boots that you want to wear when you're riding a horse, whenever you need something that's going to rise and protect your ankles, go up past your mid-calves. It's not going to go to the knees though. Why? Because the Wellington was actually inspired by knee-high boots that the Hessians were wearing. So these guys in the 1790s, I see these Germans with these great looking boots, but they were a bit high. They had a little bit of, just too many like tassels on them and things. Wellington went and talked to his cobbler, said, I want something like what they have, but let's go a little bit lower and let's go simple. And it was really about his trousers. He had these particular type of trousers that were in fashion. He wanted it to work with them. People paid attention to these boots. They're like, hey, I want some Wellingtons. I want some boots like that. So hence, now we have the Wellingtons. Now let's talk about another shoe design that came out at about the same period, the Blucher. So we have to thank Field Marshal von Blucher. He was the one that came up with the design, and he wanted to outfit his foot soldiers with a simple shoe so that they could move faster. So he came in, and up to that point, shoes, they had been designed, they were very expensive. He came up with this idea to take the back quarter of the shoe and to have a flap that went over that would basically cover the front part, which is the vamp, and that made a shoe that actually stayed on your feet, was less expensive and faster to manufacture. Now, it was kind of ugly, but being a practical German, he said, I don't care. I want something that my soldiers are going to be able to, fight Napoleon. And he did actually at the Battle of Waterloo. It was his soldiers wearing Bluchers that delivered the killing blow. Next up, let's talk about the crew neck t-shirt. Now this refers to the collar, to the neck part of the t-shirt. But why is it called a crew neck? Because it was originally worn by crews on a ship. And it was actually the militaries around the world that started making this popular. Why did they do this? Because you sweat a lot on a boat, especially if you work underneath, and these guys have expensive uniforms. So the whole idea of wearing undergarments was to protect your more expensive clothing on top. The militaries knew this. They didn't want to be replacing hundreds of thousands of uniforms all the time. So they got undergarments. In 1913, the U.S. Navy actually basically started issuing them. Why? Because they didn't want chest hair coming out. So they started having these regulations. Yes, they do regulate, chest hair and things like that. And all of a sudden we start seeing the militaries pick this up. So the crew neck t-shirt, another item in your wardrobe made popular by the military. Next up, Let's talk neckwear. So neckwear in general has been used to identify military units for well over 1,000 years. We go back, look at the Chinese, the terracotta soldiers. When you go in and look at them, they actually were wearing scarves and neckwear, oftentimes with colors, to symbolize what units they were with. But it was during the 30 Years' War that Louis XIII, I believe, he actually was very impressed by the Croat mercenaries he had hired. They had this, basically this decoration around their neck. These, what we now call cravats, were worn by them, and he made it official. He wanted to see other people wearing it. Now, from the cravat, we got various types of neckwear, but the necktie originated. Now, what's interesting is nowadays, if you still go over to certain countries, such as England, there are symbols that you'll see in regimental stripes. So when you see a regimental stripe, you actually see that's with a military unit. And in fact, I had a little bit of fun with this one. I took Marine Corps colors and I put the EGA right here. But that's what's fun about neckwear, is that you can use it to send a message, to send a signal. We eventually saw a number of clubs, different colleges. They all created different colors and different types of neckwear. Very interesting. And I just love how it's still used today to send signals of who you're with and who you're associated, where you're from. Next up, we've got the wristwatch. In particular, the field watch. So before World War I, it was the pocket watch that reigned supreme for men. Yes, there were wristwatches out there, but only women wore wristwatches. But something happened in 1879. You saw Kaiser Wilhelm I. He ordered 2,000 wristwatches for his naval officers. They wanted a simple watch that would actually be able to deal with the elements because they were out at sea and could quickly get them in time because they understood the importance of being able to time things. So the modern field watch, and the field watch was separated from all the other watches out there because it was all about simplicity of being able to tell time. So we saw the hands, we saw that they were very clear. They had, they had a high contrast background, and that was the point, is you just needed to know the time, you needed to know it precisely. Nowadays, what are you going to find on the modern military guy? Yeah, there's tons of great watches out there, but you're oftentimes going to see a simple G-Shock or something like that. They want watches that are tough, that are durable. Oftentimes you don't need all the other information. You simply want to be able to accurately tell the time, and that's what really a digital watch does. Next up, we've got aviators. So back in 1936, it was recognized that pilots needed better eye protection because when you're up at high altitudes, there's a lot of things, the glare of the sun, you've got to be able to see what's going on and you got to be able to protect the eyes. So they developed a type of lens that actually fit in right here. If you look at how it covers this bottom part in here, this style came out of simply practicality. It really just looks great on most people, different facial shapes, and when it comes down to it, it does a great job of protecting your eyes from the elements. Next up, we've got the classic field jacket. This jacket, as the name implies, was used by the military in the field. So we have the M41, the M43, the M51, and the M65. Now those last numbers, that's when the jacket was introduced. And when you think about it, each of these jackets were introduced during a war because you had to outfit 1 million soldiers. Now I say soldiers because the Marine Corps there had their own stuff. They were over in the Pacific taking care of business during World War II. Now why did this have such an effect on men's fashion? Because think about it, you make millions and millions of these jackets. Guys, they're leaving the military, you got nothing to do. They go to surplus stores, or more likely, a lot of guys just keep their jackets and write, a note saying, oh, I lost that thing. Of course, they kept them, and they bring them back and they make their way into civilian wear. In summary, the field jacket has had a huge effect on fashion because of its sheer numbers and the functionality of the piece. Next up, gentlemen, we've got the classic trench coat. I say classic because this item still can be in a man's wardrobe. Not very common, but it is a timeless piece that if you decided to bring in, and I think it's great for maybe a guy that lives in New York City, you live in Chicago, you ride public transportation, you're taking buses, you're taking subways, guess what? This is going to fully cover your body. It's going to protect your nice clothing. It does a great job with light rains, even with a little bit of light snow, and it's something that I think a lot of guys should have, especially if you're dealing with 4 seasons. Now, what is all of this for? So when you look at the epaulets, actually it used to be for rank, so that's why this would be here. You've also got straps right here, and it wasn't, a lot of people think, oh, the D-rings, these are for putting grenades on. No, that's not the history of World War I. It was simply for being able to tighten up the sleeves so that rain wouldn't go in, to be able to bring this jacket in. And that is the key with this jacket. It was functional for the trenches. World War I is where it's made its name, but it actually, we go farther back. It was the Boer War where we first saw these designs of this jacket. We go even farther back. The Macintosh, back in 1823, was the first rain-resistant jacket that we saw out there. The issue with the Mac was it's rubber and it's not breathable. You're sweating, you're almost dying in that thing. So what we saw is gabardine was used in the Boer War and during World War I. This was an officer's jacket. It was expensive, and today they're still expensive, but officers knew that having a great piece of clothing that could keep the water out, and simply was a great jacket. Now you'll notice the color here. This is not the classic color. The classic color was tan, but I decided to go with something darker. I wanted something different. This was a custom-made piece, and most trench jackets up to about 70 years ago were custom-made. That being said, the trench coat is a classic piece. It's timeless. It's been around for 100 years. It'll be around for another 100 years. So if you decide to add one to your wardrobe, I think it's great. It's functional and it looks great. It'll help you stand out from the crowd. Next up, we've got the classic navy peacoat. Now, this goes back to the 1800s, and it was the Dutch that actually made this popular and gave it its name. So the word peacoat comes from, I believe, peacoat, which and some of you guys are Dutch. Am I doing this right? So apparently pie means wool, or is referred to as wool, and it was the wool heavy jacket that sailors would wear whenever they had to stay warm up in the Arctic or be able to, get wet. And another great property, in case you don't know this about wool, is it can absorb about 50% of its weight in water, and it will still feel dry. It'll still keep and, do a good job of insulating you from the cold, even when it's slightly wet. Now, the Dutch gave the jacket its name, but it's the British who made it popular. And then the U.S. Navy adopted it as well. So we saw it just be a great naval jacket, one that was issued to millions of men. And they, again, brought it back from the military, brought it into their daily use. I love the great looking peacoat. What I really like about it, though, is it's a higher cut. So for those of you guys that want a jacket that's going to cover your backside, basically your buttocks area, at the same time is not going to be cumbersome around the legs, the peacoat is a great option. And these are warm. They're just nice jackets. Now, speaking about awesome jackets, let's talk about flight jackets. The key indicators of a great flight jacket is insulation, and it's going to seal in and around the wrists, in and around the waist, up in and around the neck. Because when you're flying at a high altitude and you're in an open cockpit or an unsealed, maybe unpressurized cockpit, you can see the temperature drop down to like negative 40 degrees. Yes, it can get that cold at 25,000 feet. And so what we saw in 1917 is that they came through with the Aviation Clothing Board. The U.S. Army put this out there. They wanted basically their pilots to have clothing, and they started developing this stuff. And we saw a wide range of different types of flight jackets, but all of these flight jackets had basically, you needed to be able to move around, especially in the bomber aircraft, to be able to move around. So you needed something that wasn't going to get caught, hence why leather was so important. Now, leather has made for great jackets throughout history. And if you're curious to learn more about leather jackets, check out this video right here. I talk about the 7 things that every man needs to know when they're buying a leather jacket. Really, guys, I go into details about the type of leather, all the details you want to look at. So check out this video right here if you want to learn more about leather jackets.